to spend your time playing video games? Why not play them on something that can also teach you about computing? Get a Commodore VIC-20. It's tough to grow up in a computer age without learning about computers.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of Belated Tech Musings. I'm your host, Belated Tech. At first glance, this keyboard seems what it is, unremarkable. But behind the plastic chassis and the printed circuit board lies a remarkable story. It is a story that began in the Auschwitz concentration camps, had a chapter in the Warsaw Pact, a brief stay in the US Army, and became the rousing conclusion of the calculator wars of the 1970s. But the most amazing part of the story is its epilogue. An epilogue that perhaps has relaunched man's quest for space travel itself to leave the very confines of Earth.
Vehicles disregard range.
And if we're beginning
Although it has been 40 years since the introduction of this smart keyboard, examples can still be found in thrift stores all over the country. Units are also plentiful at estate sales and of course online on eBay. Examples like this can be found for anywhere from $100 to $200. Expensive for a keyboard, but cheap for a personal computer. That's right, this piece of equipment, known as the Commodore VIC-20, is actually more than just a keyboard. It is a fully functioning computer. It was developed and released at the close of the exciting but short appliance computer era, a period which ended with the introduction of the IBM 5150, which most of us know better as the IBM PC. While IBM charged $5,000 for the 5150 in 1981, which is about $15,000 in 2019 dollars, the year of this episode, the VIC-20 was only $300 in 1981, or about $850 in 2019 money. This was even cheaper than the very similar and early consumer leader Tandy TRS-80 Model 1, which was priced about 60% higher. As a consequence, Commodore sold millions of VIC-20 units, easily becoming the best-selling computer brand at that time. The success of the VIC-20 led to the increasingly capable C64 and C128 models, essentially the same architecture but with improved specifications. All three models represented the very apex of the 8-bit computing era. The IBM PC and its clones eventually pushed Commodore out of the personal computer business, and a short while later put the company out of business for good. But for a glorious decade, Commodore, the VIC-20 and its successors shaped the very future of computing history. In 1954, an Auschwitz survivor named Jack Trammell emigrated from his native Poland to the United States after the war. And after a short stint in the US Army, he received a GI loan to start a typewriter repair business in New York, repairing units much like this Underwood typewriter here. Quickly tiring of repairing used typewriters, he looked for ways to sell new ones. The former Polish citizen was aware that serviceable typewriters were manufactured in Eastern Europe that could be had for less than domestically manufactured units. Trammell looked for ways to license designs from these companies in Eastern Europe and import them into the US. Unfortunately, Warsaw Pact countries were embargoed as an effect of the Cold War. So he sidestepped the problem by moving his operations to Toronto, manufacturing units there, and importing them back into the United States. He called his new company Commodore Business Machines. Tramiel partnered with a Czechoslovakian company that made the console typewriter, produced their designs of the Commodore logo, and later partnered with a German company with a similar arrangement. Commodore's typewriter business lasted about 10 years until pressure from imports produced by a resurgent Japanese industry started squeezing Commodore profits. Adding machines for decades looked a lot like this unit from Monroe. Not much different than a typewriter, but mechanically a lot more complicated. Tramiel had steered clear of adding machines just for this reason, but the invention of the transistor changed all of that. It was now possible to eliminate the gears, dials, and mechanical levers of those old adding machines and use printed circuit boards instead. Tramiel quickly licensed promising electronic adding machine designs and imported machines from overseas manufacturers. It bought Commodore another 5 or so years, but eventually, like in typewriters, Japanese companies flooded the North American market with cheap machines, and Commodore profits were once again under assault. It was another electronics invention that would change Commodore's future, the integrated circuit. Technologies developed at Fairchild Semiconductor and Intel to integrate multiple transistors into a single circuit became a reality, and the effect it had on the computing universe was seismic. Handheld calculators that one could carry around in their pocket became suddenly possible, and people would pay hundreds of $1970 just to get their hands on one. Dozens of electronic manufacturers rushed to produce competing designs, and Commodore was no exception to this. Commodore's leading investor at that time later reminisced fondly about electronic calculators. In a gross profit sense, electronic calculators were Commodore's most profitable product its entire 40-year history. Japanese companies once again flooded the market with cheap models, but profits were such that Commodore may have found that one product that could weather the competition. That is, until Commodore's supplier raised its prices, effectively pricing Commodore out of the market. At the same time electronic calculators heating up, several companies, including Intel, developed the microprocessor. The microprocessor was an integrated circuit of integrated circuits. It was a feat of miniaturization that not only compressed more circuits into a smaller space, but vastly improved the microprocessing power of computers. Quite suddenly, it was possible to build a computer the size of a television that had more computing power than mainframe computers that occupied several entire rooms. Tramiel was still trying to save Commodore's electronic calculator business. To that end, he sought out an integrated circuit designer. He found one, MOS Technologies, received a large capital infusion from the company's largest investor, and purchased it. But much to his surprise, when he talked to MOS's engineers, they told him the electronic calculator business was dead. Instead, the MOS engineers insisted that personal computers were the next thing. Tramiel allowed MOS engineers to build him a desktop computer prototype to prove it. That prototype became the Commodore PET, introduced in 1977 and shipped to customers starting in 1978. The PET was a commercial success, but Tramiel was unhappy with the number of units sold. He attributed this to the PET's price, which was higher than the competition's, and to its technology. It was still a little archaic when you compare it to units like the Apple II and the TRS-80 Color Computer. So MOS went back to the drawing board, and by 1981, they had a solution. Initially called the MicroPET, it was eventually referred to as the Visual Interface Computer Model 20, or for short, the VIC-20, a reference to the number of screen lines that were available on its display. The VIC-20 sold like hotcakes. Commodore didn't just sell thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of VIC-20s. They sold millions, and not just in the United States, but worldwide. The VIC-20's global reach bore fruit in an unexpected place. Halfway across the world from the corporate headquarters of Commodore in Pennsylvania, there was this seemingly unremarkable South African kid. He was unremarkable in academics, unremarkable in sports, and unremarkable among his peers. But when he was 10 years old, he spotted a VIC-20 at a local store. In Ashley Vance's biography, the kid, now an adult, remembered this encounter. There was an electronics store that did mostly hi-fi type stuff, but then in one corner they started stocking a few computers. It was like, whoa, holy crap. When the kid finally got his hands on one of the VIC-20s, he absorbed 6 months of training on the computer in 3 days. It seemed like the most super compelling thing I had ever seen. When that kid reached majority age, first he emigrated to Canada and then the United States. That VIC-20 had spurred what became a lifelong affair with engineering and computer programming. He studied those subjects in University of Canada, and when he moved to San Francisco, he put them into practice. First, he became a co-founder of PayPal, and then the majority owner of Tesla. I'm talking about Elon Musk, of course, and after Tesla, he founded Space Exploration Technologies Corporation, better known as SpaceX. SpaceX has upended the space industry, launching more rockets in a year than legacy companies in the industry have in the last 20. Freighters and passenger craft have been designed and launched by SpaceX, and its ambitions don't stop there. Manned exploration of Mars and the rest of the solar system are on the design boards. From an 8-bit gaming computer to landing people on Mars. What an amazing story. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Commodore VIC-20. If so, mash that like button and I'll be sure to bring more. And to make sure you don't miss more episodes, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Links to material related to this video, the BTM channel, and the VIC-20 can be found below. Thanks for watching. An epilogue that perhaps has relaunched man's quest to find travel off the planet Earth.